So we'll get started as soon as our other council person gets back. It'll be just a couple of minutes. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the September 13th, 2022 Longmont City Council regular session to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Peck,
Present.
Councilmember Hidalgo-Ferring, Councilmember Martin, Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, Councilmember Waters, Councilmember Yarbrough. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a reminder to the public, anyone wishing to speak at first call, public invited to be heard, will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first public invited to be heard. Speakers who do not place their names on the list will have the opportunity to speak during public hearing items this evening or at the final call, public invited to be heard on any item at the end of the meeting. Now we need to approve the minutes of August 23rd. Can I have a motion, please?
Second.
So it's been moved by Councilor Waters, approved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez to approve the minutes. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. We're at the agenda revisions. Are there any councilors who would like to submit documents and motions to direct the city manager to add agendas to a future agenda? Councilor Hidalgo-Ferring.
Thank you, Mayor. As I was going through, I'll discuss in a bit. I'd like to make a motion to put on the December 6th agenda under general business a discussion and to set the date for our retreat once we have the new council person added. That's why I'm waiting for December 6th to discuss the agenda, so the topics we want to address at the retreat and when we want to set the retreat.
All right, that motion's been made by Councilor Hidalgo-Ferring, seconded by Councilor Martin. Can we vote, please? No, let's have a discussion. Open it up for discussion. Let's vote.
Okay.
I'd rather discuss it, but let's vote. So that carries unanimously. Let's open it up for discussion. Or does anybody want to discuss this? I know.
I can give my rationale.
Okay.
I can give my rationale.
Okay. I did think you wanted to say something more about it.
I was.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I will.
All right. Councilor Hidalgo-Ferring.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, in going back through our notes, because I felt like we really did have a long time before our last retreat, and as I went through my notes, I know we had all agreed to wait for the new council person to be on before we moved on with a retreat. So now that we're coming close to that date, it is up to any one of us to bring this forward. So I decided it was imperative to get it set on an agenda, and so that's the way we do business. So.
Thank you. Do we have any agenda revisions, Don?
We do not, Mayor.
City manager's report. Do you have a report for
No
us?
report, Mayor, Council.
Thank you. So we have a special presentation tonight, a proclamation designating September 17th, 2022 as Constitution Day and Citizenship Day in Longmont, Colorado. So I'll read the proclamation. Whereas September 17th is designated as Constitution Day and Citizenship Day to commemorate the signing of the U.S. Constitution in Philadelphia on September 17th, 1787. Whereas the Constitution, its preamble, the Bill of Rights, and the 27 amendments define our government and are the basis for the legal structure and moral legitimacy of the United States of America. Whereas the Constitution was crafted in Philadelphia from May 25th to September 17th, 1787, after a great deal of contention and compromise among the 39 signers. It was ratified in 1789, replacing the failed previous document, the Confederation of States. Whereas all human beings born in or naturalized in the United States of America have the rights, protections, responsibilities, and obligation of citizenship. Whereas the United States of America is a nation of immigrants, the only exception being the descendants of the original nations and tribes. Whereas those who educate themselves about America's Constitution, apply for naturalization, and pass the citizenship test, have sacrificed their time, money, loyalty, and heart to become equal citizens. Now therefore I, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim September 17th, 2022 as Constitution Day and Citizenship Day in Longmont, and urge all to respect and honor our diverse community and celebrate and build a culture of inclusiveness and acceptance. So this was presented to us by Polly Christensen and Paul Tiger. No, just Polly. Thank you. Okay, turn on your microphone.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I brought some people with me. These are all, and this is very last minute, so I appreciate them coming. They were all gotten by Marta Moreno, co-founder of El Comité, and Rita Liu, who started the Asia Foundation and also the wildly popular Chinese New Year, which we hope we'll be able to have again sometime after the pandemic woes. So could you all stand up if you're new to this country and have gotten citizenship? Or, yes. Yay. I wanted to show you my father's citizenship papers. These came in a little leather case. It says Certificate of Citizenship. And he cherished these papers, as do all of these people. He came here on a boat called the Spirit of America in 1923, and it took him until 1932 to get his citizenship. Milking cows in the day, and then becoming a dairy foreman, and going to night school and learning English, and learning about the history and the Constitution, and trying to get a chemical engineering degree. So all the people who become citizens have to work very, very hard, and it takes time. So I think we should cherish them and cherish our Constitution, because we are very, very lucky to have what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Polly, would you care for a picture with all of your people that came up? So we're now at first call, public invited to be heard. Remember that the first person on the list will be on deck. You have 3 minutes, and please give us your name and address. If you do not want to give us your address, you may sign at the city clerk's desk there and put your address and phone number down, or whatever it is that you would like to give us for contact information. The first person on the list is Judy Watt.
Hi, my name is Judy Watt, and my address is 2001 Red Cloud Road. I'm here this evening to talk about pickleball. As you've all heard, pickleball is the #1 growing sport in the U.S., and that is evident here in Longmont, where an estimated 1,800 pickleball players play regularly, which is good. Unfortunately, we don't have enough courts to accommodate all the players, which is not good. So we currently only have 6 dedicated pickleball courts, 4 tennis courts that have pickleball lines painted on them, and then some courts that we've taped and are using portable nets. That's why a few months ago we organized the Longmont Pickleball Club. As a board member, I'd like to share part of our mission statement. It reads, "The Longmont Pickleball Club will continue to develop and grow the sport of pickleball in Longmont by providing a unified message regarding pickleball concerns and activities to the governing bodies of the City of Longmont and to the community at large. In particular, to advocate for additional pickleball courts in the City of Longmont." The remainder of the mission statement can be found on our website at longmontpickleballclub.com. We appreciate the individuals within the Parks and Recreation departments that have worked with us. However, because of lack of resources, we have only been able to acquire temporary and limited solutions to our problem. For example, at Clark Centennial Park, we have put tape down for pickleball lines to make 4 courts in the vacant skate park and have portable nets stored in a lockbox that only the Longmont Pickleball Club members have access to. Even though the surface is not ideal, the courts are extremely busy, proving that more courts are needed in Longmont. So we are asking for your support for a more permanent solution. Please consider providing more funding to help us acquire additional much-needed courts. Specifically, in the short term, please consider resurfacing the courts in the skate park at Clark Centennial Park and adding permanent nets so everyone can have access to them. The 4 new dedicated courts could be completed in a timely manner and be very cost-effective. Please feel free to reach out to any of the board members if you have any questions or if you want a free pickleball lesson. Our contact details and additional information about our club can be found at longmontpickleballclub.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judy. Jim Peel.
My name is Jim Peel. I live at 459 Westview Court in Longmont. You need to listen carefully because I'm going to be speaking your language, money. We're losing money because of what the county just did. Boulder County recently banned gun shows at the Boulder County Fairgrounds here in Longmont. While this has little financial effect on the county, it has a detrimental financial effect on the city of Longmont. It has no effect on any other city in Boulder County, just us. This will affect the city of Longmont financially because the sales taxes gleaned at those gun shows will no longer benefit this city. Special event sales taxes benefit the location of the event, not the retailer's physical business location. Nearly everything sold at a gun show is a high-dollar item, whether it be high-end optics, customized parts, overpriced ammunition, or the guns themselves. We elected you to represent and protect the interests of this city. As such, you people should be flocking to the Boulder County Commissioner's offices, pounding on their desks, and screaming at the top of your lungs about the damage their virtue signaling is doing to this city. They are valuing ideology and virtue signaling over the finances of this city. You need to speak up, speak out, and stop these people from damaging our city. We're just collateral damage. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Polly? No. AJ Silva?
Hello, my name is AJ Silva and I live at 2219 Emery Street here in Longmont. I'm a business owner. I own a business called Sobra Mesa Creative Solutions. I do vendor management and event coordination and basically just community outreach in Longmont and beyond. I am here because I wanted to just talk about Longmont Public Media and show some support and talk about my involvement with them. I wanted to talk about some of my favorite parts about them, which is that I have a safe and affordable co-working space that allows me to connect with other creatives and people in the community that I normally wouldn't have a chance to connect with. It's really strong in their sense of community, which I have a passion for community. Everyone I introduce to the space gets really excited, and I can see like the wheels spinning in their head about the projects or the art that they can make, which is really important, that we encourage people to make the art that they want to see in the world or to give the educational lessons that they want to give. It allows me to expand the services that my business offers because I'm not held back by a lack of space. 3 years ago, I started out hosting monthly photo shoots in my house and just like with my friends or outdoors. And now I actually have a studio space that can up the quality of my business, and it allows me to provide a better quality product overall when I'm doing photo shoots. It doesn't hold me back by the inability to upgrade my equipment. LPM having a budget to keep the best kind of equipment in their space allows me to continue to keep my skill set going. My first photography class was when I was 16 years old, and I fell in love with it then. And I love photography now, and I'm turning 29 on Friday. So one of the most important things I wanted to point out, though, is that I have been like a young mom my whole life. I brought my son here with me. He comes with me every day to LPM. And every time I'm like, let's go to LPM, he goes, yay, I love LPM. And the ability to work a business that I can both be a business owner and a mother that is active is so important, because before I was working jobs and having to pay other people to raise my son for me. I didn't get to see him when he was at school, and then when I did get to see him, I was really tired. I wasn't able to like regulate myself well, but having the flexibility and the freedom to be a person and to like work a business that I can be authentically myself, and I can show my son that his mom, you know, someone who got pregnant in high school, owns her own business now, and he gets the opportunity to see the space and to learn different skill sets as well. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Jared Johnson.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for your time. First of all, I apologize for my clothes. I kind of heard about it last minute. So I came here because of Longmont Public Media. My brothers lived in Longmont. I love the city. I love what you guys do, the community. And I just love what they provide. I set up charitable events. I like to help people. I'm planning to create a 501(c) here to help the homeless. We're setting up mentorship programs. We're going to do a lot to help the community, set up events. I'm looking at a house to buy. My partners are looking at homes to buy. The people we bring to our events are going to be shopping. They're going to be looking for homes. I know they're going to fall in love with this community, just like I did. But that is all because of Longmont Public Media. None of that will happen. None of that will continue. And none of that will be viable without Longmont Public Media. So I just want that to be taken into consideration during the 20th when you guys do have your meeting. Just know that we will be bringing in more people to this community, more great, passionate people that want to spend money, they want to buy homes, they want to help. I see there's a lot that could be done here. I see there's a lot of homeless that could be helped here. I just see a lot of room for growth. I see that there's just a lot that we can do here. And with the help of Longmont Public Media and the help of my partners, I know we're going to be here making a change. So I just want everybody to take that into consideration. I'm also speaking money like the ones before me. So when you think about it on the 20th, just remember that it is growing. There are people passionate. There are people that want to help this community. There are people that want to make a change. And there are people that are going to come spend money. They're going to buy homes. And they're going to just be as passionate about this community as all of you are. And that's basically all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
You're welcome.
So that is, I will close public invited to be heard, the first call for that. The next thing on our agenda then is the consent agenda and introduction, reading of the first title of the first reading ordinances. Don, would you mind reading the ordinances into the record?
Absolutely, Mayor. The ordinances on this agenda will be set for second reading and public hearing on September 27, 2022. Item 9A is ordinance 2022-34, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2022. 9B is ordinance 2022-35, an ordinance adopting by reference and enacting the Code of Ordinances, City of Longmont, Colorado, providing for the repeal of certain ordinances not included therein, providing for the adoption of secondary codes by reference, providing a penalty for the violation thereof, providing for the manner of amending such code, and providing when such code and this ordinance shall become effective. 9C is Resolution 2022-135, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and James David Fawcett for the purchase of real property at 841 Baker Street in Longmont, Colorado, for the Crossing Safety Improvement Project, or Quiet Zones. 9D is Resolution 2022-136, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Longmont and the Federal Railroad Administration, Department of Transportation for grant funding under the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements, or CRISI, program. 9E is Resolution 2022-137, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing the assignment of the city's private activity bond allocation for 2022 to the Longmont Housing Authority, Colorado, providing other details in connection therewith, and providing an effective date. 9F are resolutions of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the city and multiple property owners along 17th Avenue for the purchase of real property for sidewalk improvements. Resolution 2022-138, a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and the estate of Phyllis E. Owen by and through the personal representative Donald L. Owen for the purchase of real property at 1508 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. Resolution 2022-139 is a resolution of the Longmont City Council authorizing agreements between the City of Longmont and Amy J. Weinstein for the purchase of real property at 1832 17th Avenue for the 17th Avenue Sidewalk Improvements Project. 9G is Resolution 2022-140, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the application by the city to the Victim Assistance and Law Enforcement Board of the 20th Judicial District for grant funding for victim services. 9H is Resolution 2022-141, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Department of Navy for a cooperation with civilian law enforcement officials agreement. And item 9I is Resolution 2022-142, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the city and St. Vrain Valley School District for a joint school resource officer program to replace Exhibit A.
Thank you, Don. Do any council members want to pull anything off of this consent agenda? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve? I move the consent agenda. Thank you. It's been moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Waters to move the consent agenda. Let's vote. And that passes unanimously. Ordinances on second reading and public hearing on any matter. Under general business, we don't have anything on second reading tonight, so there were no items removed from the consent agenda, so we're going to move on to general business. And under general business, we're going to recess as the Longmont City Council and convene as the Board of Commissioners of the Longmont Housing Authority.
So moved.
So it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez and seconded by Councilor Waters to convene as the Longmont Housing Authority. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. So the Longmont Housing Authority resolutions for private activity bond allocations. AI is R LHA 2022-11, authorizing the acceptance by the authority of the assignment of $5,479,584 of the City of Longmont private activity bond allocation for 2022, providing other details in connection therewith and providing an effective date. Harold, do you have any comments that you would make on this before we?
We don't have any we don't have a presentation for you all. We are happy to answer questions on
Okay.
the council call.
Can I have a motion to move AI? I guess it's A1. Second, okay, it's been moved by Councilor Martin, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. Let's vote. And that carries unanimously. A2 is R LHA 2022-12, declaring the intent of the Commissioners of the Longmont Housing Authority, Colorado, to issue private activity bonds to finance the acquisition, rehabilitation, renovation, and equipping of multifamily residential housing facilities known as Village Place Apartments, and authorizing carry-forward allocation.
Again, no presentation. This is connected to the private activity bonds and the resyndication of Village Place.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to move A2? It's been moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo Faring to move. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm calling you councilors. You are commissioners. So that's been moved by Commissioner Waters, seconded by Commissioner Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. That passes unanimously. We now need to adjourn as the Board of Commissioners for the Longmont Housing Authority and reconvene as the Longmont City Council. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
So that's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by by Councilor Martin. Sorry. All those in favor, commissioners. All those in favor, vote. Commissioner 7. That passes unanimously. Now we do have a presentation on our budget discussion. I would like Jim Golden and Teresa Malloy to start that discussion. Oh, I'm really blowing it.
I think I sit. Okay.
Mayor Peck, members of council, I'm Jim Golden, the Chief Financial Officer, and with me is Teresa Malloy, the Budget Manager. And of course, Harold Dominguez, the City Manager as well, will be part of this presentation. And joining us towards the end of it will be the Chief Human Resources Officer, Joanne Zias. We'll start This is everything that we'll be covering tonight. We'll do a budget summary by fund, go through revenue projections, general fund budget summary, review the general fund reserves, and then talk about the use of the general fund balance for 2023. And then we'll go through the public safety fund budget briefly, and then we'll talk about human resources impacts in the 23 budget. So beginning with the budget summary by fund, the overall proposed budget is $414 million for 2023. That's a 5.74% increase. It's $22.5 million more than the adopted budget for this year of $391.77 million. It includes 44 individual funds, and the large percentage increases or decreases in any of the individual funds are mostly due to changes in capital expenses from one year to the next. CIP projects decreased from almost $79 million in 22 to $64 million for 23 proposed. And then the major CIP decreases in this proposed 2023 budget includes $4.2 million in the electric and broadband fund, almost $3 million in the public improvement fund, $1.7 million in the park improvement fund, $1.35 in the conservation trust fund, and $1.25 million in the transportation community investment fee fund. The major increases in the CIP are $1.34 million in the golf fund and $1.18 million in storm drainage. So I'm putting together the budget for the 5 funds that are funded by sales and use tax, which would be the general fund, the public improvement fund, the open space fund, the streets fund, and the public safety fund. This, of course, is one of our largest sources of revenue, and so we, besides property tax, which we don't have a lot to do with projections on our end, but we do put a lot of effort into making the projections for sales and use tax from year to year. The performance of the sales tax through July of 22, which I did just send an update of that to you yesterday. The sales tax is up 9%. Through July, after 7 months, the use tax is up 33.8%, and combined, we're up 12.5% for the year. Just want to point out that the previous month, and what we reflect in our budget message, is through 6 months, these numbers were 9.2, 44.7 in use tax, and 14.3 overall combined. So we dropped quite a bit in use tax and combined for 1 month. And it's not surprising to see us drop in use tax, but keep in mind how much these can drop in 1 month as we move into what we actually projected to end the year with. We project sales tax to be at 6.3% growth, use tax at 12.5% growth, and then combined 7.28% growth. And then from there, our projections for 2023, they were based off of, we usually look at a couple of things. One is the population growth based on permits that Development Services puts together each year. And then from there, we also use economic growth indicators from the state as well. And those were 1.9% population growth and 2.3% economic growth for 23. So we ended up with just below 4% sales tax projection. This odd number there to make you know that we don't just round it off. We really do our work there. And a 2.1% use tax increase. And then combined, this is a 3.69% combined increase. I think in the budget message, we flipped those and it said 3.96, but just caught that a little while ago when we corrected it in this PowerPoint. It's 3.69% is the overall growth, and that matches what's in the budget message that you received earlier. Property tax revenue estimates, again, they come pretty much from the county and the assessed valuations there. The proposed 23 budget includes 230,114 less dollars of new property tax revenues compared to tax year 2022. The preliminary assessed valuation, and that's what is in the proposed budget that we presented to you a couple of weeks ago. Now, since we put that proposed budget together in late August, we received the preliminary assessed valuations, which is the first time that they're officially needing to provide us any sort of estimate. They do give us an ad hoc estimate that our original numbers were based on, and that was early in the summer, probably May or June. Actually, could even be into July, actually. But they then did give us a preliminary assessed valuation as of August 25th, and we dropped $186,000, which we did build into the 2022 budget. So it's a little bit of a problem for us right now. So overall, our drop compared to the 22 budget is a drop of $416,000 to 44 of property tax revenue. We'll get the final assessed value certifications in November, late November. They never stay the same. Hopefully they go up, but typically in an off year like this, it'll probably do nothing but go down. When I say off year, I mean it's not a revaluation year. So taking you back to last year, SB 21-293, it reduced the assessment rates for this year, this tax year 2022, and for next tax year 2023, so the revenue years of 23 and 24. We projected last year that it would have an impact of about $460,000. Turns out from the data that we got 2 weeks ago in the preliminary estimates that it's closer to an impact of about $524,000. So the only real change from last year to this year is there is some growth, and when there is growth during the year that they identify, I'm not talking about in valuation, but new construction growth, then they do add that to the assessed valuation in these non-assessment years. And then it decreased about $524,000 because of the reduction in the assessment rates. So another factor in our revenues in the proposed budget is the number of building permits that we put into the budget for the general fund, as well as some of the community investment fee funds. So there's 800 combined dwelling units proposed, or projected, I should say, for 2023, 75 single family, 625 multifamily, and 100 townhomes and condos. So moving into the general fund itself and the budget for 2023 compared to 22. Last year, 2022's ongoing revenues and expenses were $93,477,000 and change. This year for 2023, the general fund proposed budget is $104,514,555. That's for ongoing revenue and expenses. That doesn't have the one-time expenses in it. So the proposed 23 budget ongoing revenues and ongoing expenses are $10.9 million greater than last year. That's also an 11.7% increase. So now looking at the revenues and the changes in the revenues. So again, we started last year at $93.47 million of ongoing revenue. Going into this budget, there's a reduction from last year of a little over $1 million of ongoing revenue, and then an increase of $11.96 million of new ongoing revenue, which we'll go through here now. The major decreases are in building permit revenue of $317,000 decline, or in projected decline, I should say. $214,000 projected decline in plan review fees, and $215,000 decline in the court fines. The major increases, though, in the ongoing revenue for 2023 The big one is sales and use tax at $5.59 million. That's the increase over what we budgeted for 2022. And then property tax is an increase of a little over $2 million, almost $2.1 million, which I think I will be explaining in a few minutes. If I don't, I should go back to it. Maybe I'll just explain it right now. So I think we have it in our communication, but what this is as a result of is that we did last year, because of the fact we knew that this was not a assessment year for property tax, in putting together the budget, we recommended that over $2 million of property tax revenue be treated as one-time dollars and used only for one-time expenses. So that's what's causing us to have an increase in ongoing revenue, even though I just told you a few minutes that the overall property tax revenue for 2023 is below what it was for 2022. Then we have an increase of $1.6 million in administrative transfer fee revenue from the other enterprise and operating funds in the city. The enterprise franchise fee revenue increases $761,000. And oil and gas royalties are increasing $407,000. It all is set aside specifically for oil and gas type expenses. Recreation fees, these are projected increased revenues. These aren't fee increases, but it's almost $363,000. And then a transfer from the special marijuana tax fund of $290,000. This is the second half of the marijuana tax, which was not earmarked by voters, but earlier this year was directed by the council that we use it for mental health expenses. So then this is now beginning to look at the changes in the expenses in the budget. So beginning again with the same number, the ongoing expenses last year of $93.47 million. We had an increase of over $11 million of ongoing expense in the general fund and a small reduction of $38,000, leading to overall 2023 ongoing expenses here of $104,414,000. The decrease is workers' comp insurance. It's one area that we've been able to save some money and reduce our premiums, but our claims costs have been going down, so we've been able to reduce our contributions to the self-insurance fund there. And then we also have some major increases in ongoing expenses. So first off, here is level one expenses, level one ongoing expenses. And level one expenses, we define that as those that we have no control over and that we're going to have to pay them whether we budget for them or not. And examples of those type of expenses are things like utility cost increases, contracted increases, and inflationary costs that have been really driving this number. I think last year's number for level one was around the $600,000 level. So you can see this is 3 times that amount or greater. Other areas, and we're giving you the whole list, I think, is in the packet as an attachment, but overtime costs, because of the just increases in pay, in turn, there's an increase in overtime costs that is driven by that as well. Ongoing level 2 expenses, those are, it can be either increased service levels or just increased costs for us to continue to provide maybe to a greater service base. So I think we've had some debate whether we consider that increased service levels or not. It's the same service, but it's for the same type of service being provided instead of new services. And then we got almost 10 new FTE in the general fund for $1.464 million. The police and fire CBA contract increases of 4% are increasing this budget by $878,000. Other pay and related benefits in the general fund, and we did talk to you about that last week, and the increases that we were budgeting at a minimum of 6% range differential. This is a $3.5 million increase in both pay and all the related benefits that spur off of pay. Human Service Agency funding at the 3% level of taxes in the general fund increases by $171,000. We have Smucker's property tax rebate. The first year of that rebate is actually in 2022, but we budgeted it as one-time expense last year, and we thought better of it this year because it's, that is a rebate that's going to go on for potentially as much as 8 years. So that's we decided we should put it in there as an ongoing expense this year, $472,000. Of course, that'll change from year to year depending on what their business personal property tax comes in at, and these are the best estimates that we have with what the information they provide us with. Increase in Housing Authority reimbursed positions at almost $215,000 for next year. Fleet lease rate increases. This is a combination of both O&M costs as well as depreciation. $301,000 increase for the general fund. Ongoing expenses that are associated with one-time expenses. So when we add certain one-time expenses, there's ongoing costs that go along with them, like maintenance type for software or things like that. It's $306,000 in this budget. And then our liability insurance, this is something that has been increasing quite a bit for governments in the last couple of years, mostly in the area of cybersecurity. Our premiums are what's really going up in our insurance, in our liability insurance fund. But it's $178,000 for increase for this year, for 23. Okay, so now looking at the general fund reserves, this slide here is looking at 2022. First is our reserve policy targets. Our table reserve, based on the annual calculation, it's at $5.2 million this year, and that's 5.57% of general fund ongoing expenses. Emergency reserve at 8% is almost $7.5 million. And then our stabilization reserve goal is anywhere from 3 to 8%. And that makes it a range of $2.8 million to $7.5 million. So the overall target for these three is a total of 16.6% to 21.6%. And that's $15.5 million to $20.2 million. So what we have funded this year in 22, we obviously have the table reserve funded. We have the first 8% of emergency reserve funded, and we have 4.15% of the stabilization reserve funded at $3.87 million. So our total funded reserves is 17.72% at $16.56 million. So looking at what we're proposing with the actions that we propose in the 23 budget, first of all, with the new numbers of the proposed amount of ongoing expenses in the 23 budget, that kind of changes the percent that the table reserve is down to 4.99. We reset this when our audits complete each year, so we don't get to reset this number until each April. So at this point, still $5.2 million. The emergency reserve, $8.3 million, and then the stabilization reserve is up to 3.1 minimum to 8.4 maximum. So that's a range of 16 to 21%, and it's $16.7 million to almost $22 million is the targets. What we're proposing is to add $2.5 million to the reserves in this proposed budget. And what that will do is that will bring our stabilization reserve up to 5.27% and a total of $5.5 million. So our total reserves would be at 18.3% and just over $19 million. General fund one-time expenses, we're actually going to provide you that detail on those expenses next week. But what I've got here is the source of the dollars for that one-time expenses were a combination of operations from 2021, which were $4.68 million that we carried over from operations last year, over and above what we projected we would be carrying over. And then we're now projecting for 2022 that we would carry over $3.56 million more of fund balance. Sales and use tax is a big portion of these two numbers. Excuse me. So the general fund use of fund balance is almost $5 million of one-time expenses, and then the $2.5 million of emergency reserve, increase in reserve that I just referred to. We have, at this point, $261,854 of general fund balance remaining. We are still, between that property tax shortfall I was talking about, I think we'd be careful about utilizing this because I think I may need to use this to try to fix that hole in the property tax. And we're still working on that with our proposal on the use of our take-home vehicles and the costs related to that. So on the Public Safety Fund proposed budget for 2023, there's going to be $16.6 million of sales and use tax revenue available there, almost $1 million of grants, and projected $88,000 from firing range operations. The tax was approved in 2006 originally at 0.325, increased in 17 to 0.58. So in this budget, a proposed budget, we have expenditures of $18.4 million and now 103.38 FTE from the Public Safety Fund, broken down here, as you can see, amongst police, fire, communications, support services, community health and resilience, city attorney's office, child, youth, and family, and graffiti removal. So in this proposed budget, we are proposing 8 new FTE, including 1 in communications, 3 in fire, and 4 in community health and resilience. Those numbers are within these numbers I gave you right here, and these 103.38 is inclusive of those. And then we have $912,000 for one-time expenses in the police and fire. There's a variety of those. It's detailed on page 27 of your budget message in a paragraph there. About $470,000 of that is towards fleet replacement dollars, as well as the proposed take-home program. And then we have firing range operations expenses of almost $500,000 within the proposed budget, and it's offset by 17.7% by user fees from the government users and from the public. So looking at the Public Safety Fund, we included a pro forma for YOUT, which goes out about 10 years and projects out that we should have some stability in this fund across those 10 years. Again, it's tied to the success of the sales tax, and since the 80% of the Public Safety Fund is tied to salary and benefits, it's also the growth in that number and how that matches up to the growth in the sales and use tax, which either will, contribute to the success of the fund or, put us in a position where we may be challenged to be able to meet those expenses from time to time. And that is the extent of my presentation, and we're going to move into the human resource. Yeah, we can.
Can we have some questions?
You bet.
Okay. Do we have any? I don't see anybody in the queue. Now I do. Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Mr. Golden, At the very beginning of your presentation, you identified some capital improvement plan reductions, and that doesn't happen that often. What got reduced or put off, or what? Can you explain those reductions?
You bet. I'll roll back here.
A long way.
A long, long way, that's right. And what that is really doing is comparing how much was budgeted in the 2022 CIP, or the first year of last year's CIP, on projects, and it's saying we're not budgeted as much this year for new projects in '23 as we had budgeted in '22. So that is because we may have had more money going geared towards projects last year, and so the ones that come to mind when like the big one here. I got the right one slide up? No, I don't. No, I don't. This is it. So the big one was the 4.2 million electric and broadband. And so in '22, we have over $4 million for advanced metering budgeted, and we don't have as much dollars budgeted for those large type of expenses as we did in '22. So in '23, we don't, and so you'll see that we have a decrease of when you just compare those numbers. So we haven't cut anything. We're just not spending as much on capital projects in that fund and in each of these 5 or so funds. The Public Improvement Fund, I know for sure that that's because we put $3.7 million, which we mostly transferred from the general fund balance for the first and main transit station project. So that was revenue that isn't typically part of the Public Improvement Fund. We just moved it there because that's where we would do our capital projects from. And so this year, we don't have that level of revenue to budget for out of the Public Improvement Fund. So those are just a couple of the examples of things that were greater in '22 than they are in '23.
Okay. And with the electric and broadband fund, we were actually expecting to install more meters, new meters in '23 than we were expecting to install in '22. So how does that exactly work?
So I'll let somebody come in and correct me, but I'm thinking this: what's happened is we budgeted them in '22, and those dollars are probably being spent in. Do I have the right year? Yeah, in '23. Is that correct?
So
He's out of the room.
He's out of here. Hey.
So remember in our when we have our carryovers every year?
Yeah.
So when we set the funding and how we were going to approach the AMI, we said we're going to put X amount last year, X amount this year. This year's lower than last year, but in aggregate, it's still designed to build the entire project out. And so they're going to put 600 test meters this year. That's not utilizing all the money that we budgeted. They'll
So
carry
it
it over
carries
next
forward.
year, and then we'll keep moving on that project.
Thank you.
Matt? Any other questions for me?
Councilor Waters.
Just real quick, you showed us 800 building permits. In the enclosure a year ago, we estimated 847. And the dollars aren't big. It's $316,000 difference, and I'm certain it's both numbers and types of permits. But what do you think that reflects, Jim? And just in terms of community, the growth of the community, is that I don't know what a percentage. That's about 5% less, right? A little more than 5% reduction.
Yeah, it's a little more than that. I'm going to defer to Joni, though.
Like I said, the numbers aren't huge, but just an interesting, if that's the beginning of a trend.
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Waters, Joni Marsh, Assistant City Manager. So in the 2023 projections, we go back and we really take a look at what's in the system and what could pull permits in the next kind of 3 years. So we did have a reduction in some of our residential permitting. I would also note that there were some pretty significant permits in 22, UC Health, Smuckers, and some other permits that we don't usually included in our projections because they're large, and with Smuckers we have rebates and incentives. UC Health doesn't pay sales tax, so there are some things that are anomalies every year. And then the permit numbers, are held fairly steady at about 4,500 permits per year, both in 2022 and 2023. I will note we haven't gotten the valuation adjustments from ICC yet. They haven't issued those. So I would anticipate that the multiplier I used is way low because we haven't seen those. So those are some of the factors that go in when I pull those together.
Well, I understand that there's a lot of, all the estimates here are conservative,
Yeah.
which is the way where we should be. Somebody yesterday in a meeting was asking a question about estimates. I said, that's the Jim Golden estimate. He gets paid to be real conservative. Hey, could you go to, I should have noted the number, Jim. The slide where you've got the one-time expenditures, there was a 4 million plus, right, back up. Right there. Yeah. So unpack this a bit for me. The one-time expenditures, are we talking about, this is budgeted for 2023, just under 5 million in one time. None of that is carried over from, these are not carried over from last year. These are maybe same projects, but still one-time funding or similar projects?
Well, in the general fund, there's really not many projects in that respect. So most of this is probably new, unique type of expenses. When we do have, we do the First and Main Transit out of the Public Improvement Fund this year. Actually, it's only 500,000. So I'm trying to think if there's anything significant.
That's what I'm trying to.
Attainable housing, that's new.
So what you've talked about,
Yeah.
that amount of money was that 274,000 or whatever. What did I hear? But a chunk for attainable
yes.
going into a new fund.
Right, and then we do have some money in there for the proposed, the fleet reserve and the take-home program and things like that. So I think most of them are unique probably, and there might be a few that are similar to last year though as well.
And then the 261,000, what I heard you say is, don't think about the question you asked us last year. We're not going to get this year because of what you shared about property tax and where the holes might be.
Yeah, I think we're still kind of wrestling with how to fix that, and I think we might have a solution, but we're still working on that. So it might require this.
I'll give you an example. So, and again, we're going to go over this next week. But when you look at one time, a lot of them are small items that there's just a lot of them that we have to hit. But 200,000 for early childhood capacity building, that's a big one. 100,000 for urban renewal projects associated with what we've looked at here. 170,000 to replace a tech rescue box truck.
The fleet and the take-home program was $1 million by itself. So.
$1 million just for the fleet and the take-home piece of that one.
And I want to point out a good portion of that, which we're still trying to identify the exact amount we're using it for, but is not for the take-home program, but it's for the replacement of vehicles that are scheduled to be replaced, but now our reserves that we've been putting aside to replace vehicles with are not sufficient because of inflation. So what we're first doing before we get to the take-home program is buying the ones that we were going to buy originally.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then the other thing that's sort of the ancillary spin-off on that is we have routinely used pool vehicles for some of our other departments. We've been having issues with those anyway. We're no longer going to have the pool vehicles, so we had to start replacing vehicles in, I believe it was code enforcement, and that was really the area we're focusing on now. And then when you look at this, you can see a lot of IT cost. I'm looking at least almost $500,000 in things like core router replacements and switch replacements, and those are things that some of you may have been on council when this occurred, some of you may not have been, but when we had our system shut down on us, we built a capital replacement program to ensure that we would never end up in that situation. So there's a lot of IT cost in that
Another one that was in 22 is the early childhood education. That one, we are putting a similar amount towards that.
Yeah, I heard that, 100,000. So my last question would be, we're going to vote on the 27th on the budget.
No, actually, so on the following Tuesday, whatever that is, the third, second or third, I don't know, you'll give us final direction on the budget. You will have a hearing on the 27th, but.
I guess that's what I was thinking.
Right, but
yeah.
you won't need to vote, and we'll ask you for giving us direction in the first meeting in October, first study session, and then the next week we'll bring you the ordinances and the ordinances on the first read.
So if there was some direction somebody had in mind, we would wait until either the hearing or the first meeting in October.
I wouldn't discourage you from speaking out now. It gives us a little bit more time to try to react.
Well, okay. I would be prepared to make a motion on, we've heard from folks about Longmont Public Media. I'm not certain where we are with that negotiation. Would you like a motion on that tonight? I don't know where the rest of the council is on this.
We're actually bringing that one to you all for a specific conversation because that is a council item, so we are bringing that to you. What date is that, Sandy?
Next week.
Next Tuesday.
So that was the reference to the 20th. I'd looked in the queue, not for that, but to report to LDDP. I didn't see that on the.
It's part of the budget.
Oh, okay. That's all I saw was the budget discussion. Very good. I'll wait till then. Thanks.
So I do have a question as well. Sorry, Jim. On one of your slides, you said that there was a carryover from 2021 in operations and 2022. This probably, your explanation is probably going to be similar to the AMI, but is this carryover from all departments in operations, or where are those dollars coming from exactly?
Well, don't ask exactly.
Okay, generally, overall.
Generally, I can answer. Exactly would be it's like this puzzle that you would never want to try to put together.
Okay.
So, so it's coming from many sources. So it's all, and I pointed out that most of it is probably from sales and use tax in excess of what we either budgeted or projected during last year's budget. So. That's the good deal of this. But then there's also due to savings that are taking place in most departments in the general fund to some different degrees in different departments. And then there may be other line items like sales tax, but much smaller, that are coming in over budget. On the other hand, we would have revenue projections that are not coming in at budget as well that also offset those. So I could go on all night long about where we underspent and where we overspent and over-received and under-received, but it's the net of it all, everything in the general fund.
And then in some cases, I just asked Teresa, there's probably a fair amount of salary savings because we had so many vacant positions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, it gets different, though, because in areas where you have vacant positions, but you still have to do the work, and you have overtime requirements associated with it, and this is probably more representative in public safety in our operations group, you will see where they save money on their salary line items, but their overtime is through the roof because you still have to maintain minimum standards. So that's probably a more granular example of how all of these numbers start fitting together.
Okay, I was hung up on the word operations, thinking that perhaps in different departments, you were not using your operation money for some reason or other, and that basically you did explain that.
Yeah, there's a long list and variety of reasons. If you went into the city's comprehensive financial report and went into the general fund budget to actual statement, you'd see all sorts of differences between the budget and the actual in expenses in every division in the general fund. No one ever spends exactly a budget. It's either mostly it's under, and so that everyone's contributing towards that savings. And then the revenues, same thing. There's all
Okay.
sorts of variety, so.
Thank you.
And just to help you for the future for some of our newer council members, when we go into the carryover process and we look at that and what folks want to carry over, we go through an analysis of that and we make decisions on whether yes or no that's a carryover based on what people are wanting to do. So if Jim had $100,000 and he wanted to do something different other than what it was budgeted for, it's like, no, we're not going to carry that over unless it's something that's smacking us in the face. But if it's the project continues, then we carry that over. So there's multiple times, there's a couple of times during the year when we have these conversations looking at those savings and the carryover.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I think that's it. I don't see anybody else in the queue for questions.
So, good evening, Mayor Peck, members of council. Joanne Zias, Chief Human Resources Officer. Wanted to go over a couple of things related to budget and human resources. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the hiring impacts and some citywide retention needs that we have and some things that we've been doing to address them. And then I'm also going to turn it over to Sandy Cedar, and she'll update you on where we are with the workforce of the future. So just to go back to where we were last week, we were talking a little bit about a 70% number for employee compensation in the general fund. Did run that number, and budget found that it was 74.5% of expenses in the general fund. And it's also a substantial portion of our expenses in other funds. Outside of expenses, employees are kind of our lifeblood. They're what we need to be able to move forward and deliver our services. So they come with all kinds of specialties, all kinds of skills, and we really can't operate without our employees. We've had a number of critical employee vacancies, and some vacancy rates are going to impact in times the provision of services. And so we want to make sure that we're minimizing that we're making sure that we're caring for our employees, and that we're retaining and attracting people that we really want to be here. Some changes that we saw in the employment landscape. We had a very low unemployment rate throughout the country, and especially in Boulder County. We've also had some increased opportunities in the labor market, so our employees have had chances to be able to move. There's been a really high competition for qualified employees, and as a result, we've had a really high turnover rate as compared to prior years. So what we've seen prior to COVID, we were looking at like a 10.9% rate. We're looking now at a 16.48%. We ran that from September to this August, so it's significantly higher. Some examples of things that we had not seen in the past that we've just recently seen is smaller jurisdictions actively recruiting. So in some cases, we are competing with places like Firestone or places like Johnstown, and we just did not see that in the past. They were not competitive with what we had. Sometimes what they will do in different jurisdictions, if they have a need, is pay higher than market pay. So we'll see a whole group of employees that will move over for higher than market pay. Not sure if that's a long-term strategy or maybe it's a big project that they have that they want to recruit a large number of people for. And those specialty positions really can be impacted by that. We've also seen some hiring bonuses, particularly in public safety, but also in other areas. Take-home cars, which I think you've heard about this week, last week, and before. And also just engineering has been another area that we've had some impacts, particularly from smaller jurisdictions. So I don't want to give you all a bad news story, so we really just took a look and...
Let me jump in real quick. So to give you an example in terms of what we're seeing numbers-wise and how fast this can move on us, and then talk a little bit about police. Obviously, there's a lot of pressures right now in terms of public safety police positions. We're not any different than other jurisdictions. But if you all remember, it was about a year ago when I was just before we brought on Zach to join us. We were at about 25 officers down, and then we had a number of officers that were in some type of light duty because of injuries. And we drastically changed our process in terms of what we were going to do to how we were going to bring officers on. So we went from approximately 25 down to single digits. We then hit 20 again recently in terms of the number of officers down. I think we're at 18 now. And so the point I wanted to make in this is that, we're just doing this there's a lot of things that are involved in it. Retirements are a component of it. The items that Joanne mentioned in terms of people, it's a really competitive job market. But I wanted to use that as an example because I think that is, while every division in the organization isn't experiencing the same to the same level, that's probably the extreme of what we're seeing. We're seeing some that get very close to it. Engineers were one mid-year where we were really struggling just because of the competitiveness in the market. And that's one based on the authority you give me. We made mid-year adjustments when we re-looked at the benchmark because it was just moving so fast on us on the engineering positions. But I wanted to just take a moment to let you know kind of what we're seeing in the numbers. I think, if we look at the fire department, they were 8. We're now 3 down, 2 or 3. You're seeing 3 positions we're adding. What we're actually trying to do is to manage that because their margins are so narrow on the fire side in terms of keeping people, on shift. And so that's an example of what we're doing. We're seeing some relief in some areas, but it's not broad across the organization.
And so Harold kind of started, I guess, talking a little bit about what we're doing for some efforts in recruiting and hiring. And we do still have a higher turnover rate, but I think that a lot of these efforts are paying off in that we're not seeing as high of a turnover rate as we do see in the national statistics and some of the statistics as a whole. And so some of the things that I'd like to highlight, the first thing we did is partner with Start to Home. And so that home buying assistance is available for both current and prospective employees. That's one that I like to highlight because it has an impact on retention as well as for recruitment. And also for just Longmont and people being able to stay. We did come to council who had approved a recreation staffing salary change to $15.50 an hour. That was pretty significant in being able to maintain staffing levels in those areas. We had some enhancement to contract services for recruitment. And so this is a number of different things. We created a responsive system together with the Denver Post. And that's a neat one because what it does is it sends job boards money based on their response to us. So if they're sending us candidates and we're qualified candidates, we can then send more money to that particular job site as opposed to a different job site. So that's a very unique process for us. We also did set up a job slot system with LinkedIn. Those have been around for a little while. We didn't do that because of some legal challenges that we had with it, where we needed to use personal emails. We were able to move forward with that, and we do have that available. So we're constantly spotlighting 10 positions at the city at this point. We've also added some online systems. There's a new system called Circa, which used to be diversity jobs. We found in our career builder that they just weren't highlighting our jobs for diversity as much as we wanted them to. So we're actually running that side by side right now with career builder, and we're going to compare the results at the end of the year and figure out which one is really giving us a better value. We added Purple Handshake. That is a students and alumni network. So it's getting current students that are in college and also alumni from college access, and that is actually at no cost to us. We've updated our application process. So now what we can have for employees or prospective employees is they can go ahead and submit a resume and cover letter as opposed to going ahead and having to complete a full application. That's important, especially if somebody's taking a application and going on to their phone to apply. They don't want to sit there and complete an application and we'll just lose them. We've increased our job fair presence. We've been partnering with local colleges and diverse organizations. We've been very fortunate that we've had a volunteer that's been working with us. He's a retired HR director, and he's actually taken that on and gone out to colleges and made relationships with each one of those career centers. We have additional use of some open and filled. And so what that does is allow us to keep a position open and not have a set date. So if we don't have a great candidate in 3 weeks, we can keep it open. But if we have a great candidate in a shorter period of time, we're not stuck with a 30-day period and then we lose them along the way. Taking a look, we've been trying to streamline that pre-employment testing process as much as possible. Sometimes we've found that that just takes a little bit of time and you can lose a candidate along the way. We don't want to lose anyone. We've been actively, Harold just mentioned the police hiring. One of the things with that was actively recruiting some lateral hires from across the country. So it was people that were coming in with that experience as opposed to individuals that were coming in and having to go through the whole training. We've been working pretty heavily with the P-TECH program through the school district. And so that helps us to go ahead and recruit alumni and early graduates. That also will move into our internship program in the next slide. We've had some active recruitment with Workforce Boulder County, just making sure that we're physically there, that we have a connection and a relationship with them. Same thing with the state of Colorado. We have a representative that we talk to regularly who sends us candidates from the Disability Services Department. And we've been just starting community event attendance so that when we have events, it may not be related to jobs, but you may find people there that either are interested in jobs, or their spouse wants them to be interested in jobs, or their kid wants to be interested. They have a child that they can send for our temp jobs. And we've been able to try to pick up some candidates that way.
Hey, Joanne, can you go back to the previous slide? One of probably the most significant changes we made is really this use of open until filled. We used to go out and say the positions are going to be open for a month. To give you some context, what we were dealing with, by the time we closed it and we started asking a lot of folks if they wanted to come in for interviews, a lot of them we've already taken jobs. There are certain positions within the organization where if you don't move on it within a week of when it comes in, we've seen that on a couple. We call back and go, do you want to come in? They're like, I've already taken a job. And so this was really our response to get in very quickly because that's how fast the market was moving. On the next slide, to give you some more context on the PTEC, we are in conversations right now with the school district on a, Sandy, do you want to talk about that?
Thanks, Harold. We've been invited to be an industry leader for the new PTEC class at Longmont High. So their focus is on business and tech. And so you'll be seeing that agreement, and you get to decide October 11th if you'd like for us to pursue that.
But that's really an extension of what you all talked about in terms of internships. And we thought this is really good because we can get in and really talk about what we need and work with students early on.
Can I ask a fast question? Are those PTEC positions going to be paid?
Mayor, the way that it works is that they start as freshmen in PTEC, and so we work with them with mentors, and we help guide them through 9th, 10th, and then in 11th grade and 12th grade, they're required to do an internship that is paid by the city. So when you see the agreement that will come to you on October 11th, there's no budget impact today or next year, but when those students become 11th graders, then we'll be asking for some funds to be able to pay those stipends as appropriate. But yes, they are paid internships between 11th and 12th grade. So
great.
Like I said, we'll be starting with, if you approve the agreement, we'll be starting with those freshmen next year.
Okay, thanks.
And really the same concept with the internships is really to build our staffing model within our community and get folks that are really interested in what we do. And it's, trying to get them early and get them to stay with us and hopefully continue as staff members.
And so this item being in the hiring efforts that are completed, what we're referring to here is really the recruiting efforts for the alumni that are more job fair oriented. And so it's not that experiential piece that we haven't started yet. It's the piece where we're just going to their job fairs and to work with them as they're looking for positions following their completion of the program. Some efforts that are in process, and these are not yet completed. I think we kind of talked about this a little bit. This is the PTEC program, so we're looking to participate in that as an upcoming program. Have started those conversations. We've been involved in those planning meetings. We also are in the process of working with the Office of Equity to train employees in becoming recruitment ambassadors. And so what I mean by this is really everybody going out and talking about how great it is to work for the city. We find a lot of times that people don't think about a municipal career, but when they look at their goals and they look at their values, it really fits well because we think about our mission and we think about making a difference in the world. And so when we can expose people to that and we can talk about it a lot, we really can make a difference in trying to get people to be interested in our positions. And so we want them to bring it everywhere. We want them to bring it to their kids' Little League game. We want them to bring it to every activity that they possibly participate in. So we're going to start training our employees in that and just hoping that everybody talks everywhere they go.
I'm sorry, can we have one more question before you move on?
And it was
Councilor Rofering. Whoops.
Thank you. And it was actually back to the other, when Sandy was speaking about the PTEC. So it's very similar to the P-Teach. And so currently I have a P-Teach teacher in my room. She is a freshman, so it's not a paid internship, but she's able to shadow and watch during her class time. Will there be opportunities for students prior to internship that they can actually shadow and kind of see what the operation is as we're trying to essentially grow our own? So we
Yes, Mayor Peck and Councilmember Hidalgo Faring. That's exactly right. We start working with them as freshmen and we'll assign them mentors throughout the city. We have several partners that'll be along with the city, LADP, the Chamber of Commerce, the DDA. There's several groups that'll be doing this. But what we'll be doing is soliciting employees that are interested in kind of the areas of P-Tech focus, and then we will be matching those students with a mentor that starts when they're freshmen. And so some of that, part of the agreement is that we'll go to them, sometimes they'll come to us. And so absolutely that's really valuable, because building up to that internship, the internship is important, but all the relationship building and mentorship and conversation before that is as important as well. So yes, we start with ninth grade, and they would be partnered up with a mentor from the city, and they would have those opportunities to be able to work and shadow and really learn from them several years before the actual internship would happen.
And then do you know of any other municipalities who are following this type of model, looking at the success rate?
I do not. That's probably a good question I could ask at our next steering team, Joanne, as other cities. It was my understanding, at least in this case, that this is the first time that a city has been asked to join the St. Vrain Valley P-Tech programs.
This is great. So years ago, when I served on the Ethnic Minority Advisory Council for Colorado Education Association, we did a lot of work throughout the state and actually looking at different states, the grow your own model. And so, that's when we went back to districts and said, hey, we have this grow your own, this is what it looks like. The district evolved, created the P-Teach. Looks a little different. However, just that opportunity for students early on to make those connections and looking at the type of work, but then also making the connections with the people who do the work, the professionals who've been, if we keep it positive, it's a little harried after 30 years, but keeping it positive. And so it's a great model. So I think that, seeing cities do that, if we are successful, I know that the Grow Your Own teaching has been really successful nationwide. And as I'm seeing how the P-Tech, from what I'm hearing happening, it's another way. I anticipate it will be very successful in recruiting and our own, individuals who live in the community. So, just people who live here, work here,
I have no doubt that it's going to be helpful to the students, but I also think the staff will enjoy it too.
It'll be fun. I enjoy my P-Teach teachers.
Okay, I think that we'll hold all the other questions until the end of your presentation.
Just about there, actually.
Oh, okay.
So the last hiring effort that I wanted to highlight is we've been working a little bit with communications. And so what we're trying to do with that is just make sure that we have some branding in place. And we're highlighting especially our non-traditional benefits, because as we're finding that those are a strategic advantage for us, in particular flexibility as needed, and being able to work with people's schedules. We think that that's a benefit for us. And so if that is a benefit, we really should get it out there and highlight it. Also just getting our new logos on there, our new branding on there. And we're currently working on a short benefits video for job candidates because, we hand them right now a book of benefits. That's not what they want. They really want something little to be able to kind of go through and show what advantage we have in that area. So this is my last slide on this particular piece on hiring. So these are the budget requests that we have in this year related to recruitment and retention. Some of these level ones we just really didn't have a lot of decision making on. It's really just the increase in turnover that's leading most of these. So drug screens, physical abilities tests, background screenings, those things are just necessary expenses. Job postings and pre-employment testing was cost increases, so that's why those are in there. And then there's public safety corresponding as well. For our level 2, we increased recruiting just a little bit. We think that we've been a little bit more strategic with that. So we have increased our recruiting footprint a lot more than I think that recruitment budget needed to go up. And then there's also a human resources coordinator position in that FTE count that we've been talking about. And the purpose for that is twofold. It's one, to be able to handle the increased turnover because we need to make sure that we're processing and we're caring for people and they get paid properly. But then the other piece of that is really to manage that intern program that we're talking about with PTech, as well as if they have the opportunity to be able to explore career-wise and I Have a Dream and some of those other programs that are out there. And so that's the snapshot for recruitment. Open for questions.
I don't see any, but I want to thank you. You put in a lot of work into this. And I do see that Councillor Waters is now wanting to chime in. So thank you, Joanne. Councillor Waters.
Well, I don't know if this is for you or for Sandy in the context of workplace of the future, but it's specifically if our average turnover is 16+%, I'd be curious to know what the range is. And not to know that by department, but you obviously know that by department. What I'd be curious to know is, what are you learning, especially in those departments with, if the average is 16, you have some at substantially more than 16. How critical are those departments or the people or the positions in those departments, and what are you learning that shows up in workplace of the future or other approaches here? So, whether it's here or there, I am very curious about, especially on the high end of that range and the low end of that range. I mean, there's something to learn that would help the city on both ends, right? Where you don't see much and where we're seeing a lot. And what can we do with what we're learning to increase continuity, right, and stability?
So, Mayor and Councilmember Waters, there's a couple of them that really do stand out, and we already called them out in the slide, so I guess it's okay to call them out. Public safety was a very large one, and that's actually one of the areas that we needed to address in this budget. The other one that really, even though it's a smaller department, we had a lot of challenges in engineering because we were seeing those signing bonuses, and we were seeing smaller organizations, smaller counties become very aggressive in that area. So those are the two that were really standing out. And so we've really kind of had to hit them from a recruitment and a competitiveness standpoint. The ones that I see that tend to be more stable, we need to do more work on and go back and do stay interviews. We just have not had the opportunity yet to do that, but that is something that's on our list.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Peck, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. I'm going to walk you through the workforce of the future retention actions, but I do just want to give a shout out to Joanne and her staff. In a very turbulent time, she certainly has been able to put together a whole lot of different recruitment strategies that many of which I had never seen before. So I certainly appreciate that work. Okay, so first I want to start off with the council feedback. So we gave, Joanne actually gave a presentation on workforce of the future, and then you gave some recommendations back to us on things you would like for us to focus on. This list gives those items along with their status. So for example, ensuring competitive pay and potentially premium due to higher costs of living. I think you've seen that in the compensation work that we're taking a look at. Aggressive recruitment and retention, I think you've just seen that as well. Child care for employee families, I believe that the 2023 budget does include some funding to try to start to take a look at that in conjunction with other employers in the community. The internship program, I should mention that PTEC's not the only one, that we really had talked about doing a city internship program, certainly something with council members, something that went along with Leadership Longmont. There's all sorts of other internship possibilities that we could run. And other programs that we could join. So that HR coordinator that we're talking about would also take a look at those pieces in addition to PTEC. Flexibility, you're going to notice in the Workplace of the Future Task Force recommendations that was really the big darn deal, was flexibility. Flexibility in working from home, or if you have a job, which 3/4 of our employees have a job where you can't work from home, flexibility in schedule, and other kinds of taking a look at different perks around that. So you'll see some more of that coming up. Sabbaticals, we can offer unpaid sabbaticals now, but we're doing a little more research because my guess is people won't necessarily jump on that idea. So that's something we need to do further research into, which was something that you brought up for us. Ensuring that the staff wants the things we're offering. We worked with this task force to try to do some surveying and some individual interviews to make sure that where we were headed is where people wanted us to head, and then ensuring the current staff reap the same benefits. And so we're making sure that that happens. In fact, we have a couple things that we're kind of working through. How do we apply this to existing staff and not just new hires? So you'll see some of that information a little bit later.
So that's where we are on the direction you gave us. In addition, we pulled together a task force from people across the organization, all different levels and all different departments, to talk about what is the workforce of the future really going to look like. They created a 20-page report, which they shared with the directors, and came up with a list of recommendations. This is that list of recommendations and kind of where we are on all of those items as well. Kind of categorized them because there were lots of recommendations, lots of great ideas, and I was very thankful for their participation because it was very helpful. Like I said, flexibility, that's the name of the game. So we created work agreements. The team actually created a new flexible working policy. They also created individual agreements that every employee worked through with their supervisor. If there was a possibility for flexibility, whether that be scheduling or whether that be work from home, the agreements were then created individually between team members and their supervisors. They talked about things like core working hours, flexible schedules. You know, we had some groups that went to a 4-10 schedule, or at least seasonally if they had to work, you know, in the field, or we had people that started to create hybrid schedules, and there was all sorts of things we had to put together in order to accommodate that. Of course, agreements were contingent on making sure we were providing excellent customer service. For many of these supervisors, they'd never had that conversation before, so we had to do some training. We started off with Harold, and Harold led a flexibility training class for all supervisors. He led a series of them, several of them, which I appreciated his time because his perspective was really invaluable as part of this training for supervisors to recognize that, man, this world has changed. Turnover is high. We are really trying to recruit people, and if you're not providing flexibility, they're going to go somewhere else. And that's, I think, what we were finding. I think that was one of the things that we heard in different organizations was, I think it was the mayor of New York that said, okay, everybody come back, COVID's over, and 30% of the workforce immediately quit. Oh, okay. We also needed to do some other training, teams training, remote training, oh my gosh, all these things that we need to now figure out from a tech perspective. So we've enhanced that IT training, including Microsoft Teams and Office 365. Our training coordinator created an entire battery of hundreds of online training classes that were available off network so that people could join whenever they could join rather than having to be at a certain class at a certain time. And we still hold Harold's team meetings just to keep people updated on what's happening with the city, which are available anytime people want to see them. They're out there and available.
Well, I think you all actually joined on some of the original ones when COVID started. We actually just continued that, so every other Thursday, although the last two have kind of fallen on days that I'm out. So, but we jump in, but it's every other Thursday to just talk about what's going on with the organization. We open it up for questions. Some days we get questions, some days we don't, but it's really a fun time to talk with folks and see what's going on and also educate what others in the organization, what different departments are doing. We're finding that that's actually becoming something that's everyone's really interested in is what's going on in this department. And I think that really goes to broader-based team building as well.
Yeah, thanks, Harold. The next category really is job description. So what we found is that some people really can work from home, some people really can't. Some people need to come in for inclement weather, some people don't have to. So let's actually define those in the job descriptions was one of the requests of the team. And so Joanne and her team have done a several-month project with all supervisors to update every job description in the city. We're in the process of adding all that information in right now, but supervisors filled out a matrix to say, yes, this person could work hybrid, or this person needs to report in, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a huge effort. And that identification is important because clarity is kindness. It's important to make sure that people know what's available to them based on the needs of their job. Workplace safety, another aspect that was really fresh on people's minds was, hey, you know, right now people are staying home when they're sick. We think we can keep that up around here so that we're not infecting people with other things. And so really making sure that places are appropriately cleaned. You'll see in this year's budget that there's a custodial supervisor that's proposed because we realize that, you know, there needs to be some really good coordination to make sure that we have the highest cleanliness. That employees are staying home when they don't feel well. We say that about every other team meeting or so and try to model it ourselves. And then make sure that, and one of the things that came from them was a benefit for employees who were required to report in when it is unsafe for everybody else. So when we're closing the buildings due to inclement weather, and yet we're telling snowplow operators and police officers they need to come in, is there some benefit to that? And so we actually just recently passed Administrative Regulation 30, which does allow for people who come in on an inclement weather day, a day off that they can take later.
Sandy, I want to go back on the custodial supervisor. That's also directly related to struggles in hiring. It has been incredibly difficult to hire custodians, and so really getting a supervisor that can work the broader systems of custodians, so when we don't have the numbers we need, they can really come in and work the scheduling and work with folks so we can serve our entire organization. So part of that is to deal with that. The other thing is bringing it more long-term beyond the hiring challenges, but more long-term what we were seeing in the organization is just stronger coordination, stronger communication across all of our operating divisions.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I also think that there was some sort of a little bit of a divide between those who can work from home and those who can't work from home. Some of these benefits, like enhancing our on-call and callback policies, really are for field folks. The inclement weather admin reg really is for folks that have to come in a snowstorm. And then we're encouraging people who don't have to stay home, because it certainly helps everybody if they're off the road. So really trying to bring some balance to what flexibility looks like for all sectors of the city. Workspaces of the future. So we're in the process of adding some modular workspaces, some multi-purpose spaces that people can come in and work if they do have a 100% remote schedule, but they need to come in for meetings, that they have a place that they can be. I think we've been pretty clear that if you are going to work from home some portion of the time, you're not guaranteed your own private office. We need to be able to be flexible with those workspaces. If you ever have a chance, Joni has done a great job over at the Development Services Center transforming some of her spaces into this multi-purpose arena. We're still working on our one in the Civic Center. I think we've ordered the furniture, but we're trying to just make sure that people have a place that they can call home when they come into work if they're not here all the time.
And this is important when we look at some of our capital expenditures. So when, 2-3 years ago, we were talking about we're running out of space and we need more office space. And so we were really looking at some capital expenditures having to come in to create that space. Well, by embracing the flexible work environment and having the workspace of the future, we actually are creating more virtual space for our staff that's not necessarily pressing us to go in with capital dollars for new space. And so when we came into this budget, there were requests for, we need more space. And we said, look, if we're coming in and we're honoring and really letting people work in, remotely and come in at different times, we can manage that space with what we have. So it's actually helping us on the capital side as well in terms of our space requirements.
Yeah, I think that's true. And then, of course, if we're going to be having these hybrid meetings and people working from pretty much anywhere, we needed to make sure that conference rooms were equipped with that kind of technology and that employees had the tools that they needed to be able to do their work from anywhere. So in the 22 budget, Harold approved some funding for that, and ETS has been working through each of the conference rooms to provide hybrid options. We've even tried it here, right? A little bit. Co-working space and implementation of e-signature software. These were all suggestions from the team that we've all pretty much implemented at this point. E-signatures will, of course, go a lot farther if the ballot issue, which I think we now know is 3A, ballot issue 3A around charter changes, if that allows for electronic signatures for other documents outside of contracts. So, because there's a lot of, why are we running around getting wet signatures? Right, good question. Communication and involvement was another huge category, because as we work from anywhere, we also tend to have a tendency to be disconnected. So that regular ongoing citywide meeting and email was important. Offering hybrid council meetings, and I think we're still kind of exploring. We've done a little bit of that, but we'll continue to explore that. Updated guidelines for community involvement. The community involvement team has met. We'll be working through how can we start to do remote meetings as a public option for different kinds of involvement projects, because it is easier for some people and it does reduce some equity issues for some, while still not reducing the in-person need to be able to meet. And then discussions on cross-functional and cross-departmental opportunities to connect and learn. Harold has recently introduced the idea of centers of excellence to our directors team. and really bringing people from across the organization to kind of tackle the wicked problems, even the simple problems. They don't all have to be wicked, but you know, that kind of concept. So these are all recommendations from the task force that we've implemented. And so in summary, recruitment and retention is a work in progress. We're obviously open for suggestions and committed to create that workplace that cares for employees while still ensuring efficiency and value for residents. Now, those are the things that were in the task force notes. Those were all their recommendations and your recommendations. We also recognize that we're taking a look at some vacation policies just to make sure that we're competitive. The same thing, like I said, for the on-call and callback pay, those types of things, just to make sure that not only is compensation competitive, because that is number one, and then are we competitive in some of these other areas. So if those require personnel rule changes, you'll see those a little later. So hopefully, Councilmember Waters, to answer your question about the big picture, compensation is a piece of it. But absolutely that flexibility, that ability to work anywhere, the ability to have the tech that you need to be able to get your job done and still feel connected to your organization. It's all those things that I think make a great workplace. Yeah. Happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Waters?
One of your last comments, Sandy, just sparked a question. Since we're in the process, I'm certain, of crunching numbers from the survey, the community survey, there's a relationship potentially between what we learned from the survey and where we end up with Workplace of the Future. Your last comment was about the community being well served, and the balance between making certain we have a staff that feels heard and that the organization's responsive to what the needs of the workforce are. We also have the community that expects to be served when they need to be served. So when will we see the results of the survey, and what are the likelihood that we'll start to see something in Workplace of the Future that reflects what we've learned from the community?
I think that's really important because one of the first things that we talked about was reaching out to customers to determine how we were going to be serving them.
Yeah.
And we certainly added some technology and some other things that you'll see in the council communication that gets there based on those focus groups. But the question about citizen satisfaction survey, I believe that comes back to you on the 22nd. I can double check really quick, but I think that's coming back to you on October 22nd. We have a new group that's doing this survey, so there's a little back and forth, making sure that we were asking the questions that we knew were important to council. So you should be seeing that, and I'll check real quick as soon as I sit down. But I believe it's October 22nd. And I do think that matters, right? We need to be able to look and see.
It does.
We wanted to ensure that historical data that we've had from other customer satisfaction surveys are not lost because we have a new survey group. And they are going to be able to do those comparisons. Many of those questions are exactly the same as they've been for 15, 20
it'll be
years.
interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if anybody in the community who's paying real close attention both acknowledges, you can't run the city without the kind of talent that we're able to recruit and retain. But we've been real clear, we're putting more money into compensation. We will have added 40 FTE over the last 2 years. It wouldn't be surprising for the community to say now, I want to make certain what we're going to see as a result of all the things you've done internally, right, in terms of responding to community needs and services to the public. So,
Yeah,
and I think that'll be a good
interesting to say.
discussion when we get there.
Yeah, I'm recognizing the 22nd can't be it because I don't think that's a Tuesday. Let me check. 25th,
Well, October 11th
25th,
is a
something.
Tuesday, so start to go, from to the 18th and the
That's
26th.
good. I think it's the 26th. Yeah.
Well, and you actually get at a good point that we spent some time talking about today. There have been some governmental institutions that have said we're going to go to 4-day work week.
That would be a really good example.
Well, I've had, what I've said to our folks is you can accomplish that and we can still be here 5 days a week by how we staff because we need to be cognizant of our community and who we serve. I've had my own issues getting certain things done when Friday is the only day I can get to it and things are closed. And so that resonates with me to say, sometimes the only time somebody can come in and pay their utility bill may be on a Friday. And when I've led the conversations with teams on workplace flexibility, it was about get creative. If you want to look at a 4-day work week, bring part of your group on Monday through Thursday and the other group on Tuesday through Friday. And you can still accomplish that while serving the community. And you could probably go even a step further to say if we do it right, we can actually augment our service hours. And so that's kind of what we're asking folks to look at. Because if we can't serve them, then it doesn't matter what we're doing here. We're not meeting our
Yep.
core objective.
Yeah, thanks.
Counselor Hidalgo-Faring.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is more a comment, observation. I'm really appreciative that, you took this and you went back to the employees to collect their input, what their priorities are. I mean, we could sit and we can come up with our goals, we can come up with our priorities and what we think people would want in order to, why they, want to come work for the city of Longmont. But, there were things on here that I didn't even, that I didn't consider. I was like, oh yeah, I thought, of course, compensation, childcare, efforts such as that, and that those did make the list, but that flexibility piece. And then after experiencing COVID and what that looked like, and just the, stay home when you're sick, just sending that message. That's huge, because a lot of people, I'm probably a bad example. I'll just hide back here. I'll just muster through. But really, it impacts the other employees and your capacity to do good work and connect with the community. So, I just really appreciate your efforts. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Ditto what she said. Thank you, Sandy.
I believe that is the end of our stuff.
Actually, so Mayor Peck, I have a couple of more follow-up issues. So first, on the upcoming meetings, so on tonight's agenda, we put on our list that we were going to be talking about the take-home car policy proposal. And we still working on finalizing the separation of dollars between the replacement money and the program and how much we can do with it in the first year. But that has been postponed 2 weeks. We don't have the staff here next week that would be able to speak towards that. So, or maybe willing and able. So we're going to do that on the 27th.
Okay.
And also then, a couple weeks back, council made a motion to ask us to bring back on during a budget discussion night a question that you raised yourself, the mayor, about sales tax on electrical residential usage. I know you and I did have a discussion. I don't know if you want to lay the groundwork for this, or if there's a question you'd like for me to respond to or talk about. So.
Sure, I'll let council know why I even asked that, is that I've been getting questions from residents as to why do we pay electric rate? Why do we pay a city sales tax on top of that? And what was the other thing? There are 3 things on there. I can't remember.
Well, the ones that we discussed was electric and gas.
Right.
And then I think the other things you referred to in your motion were lodging and telecommunications. But then I think all we discussed by email was about electric and gas.
It was the electric city sales tax on our utility bill for electricity only, not for water, et cetera. And I'd also talked to the city manager about this. And correct me if I'm wrong, because this is a hard concept for me to give to the public when it doesn't show up. When they have bills from other providers of electricity, they don't see on their bill a city sales tax or a sales tax. But what I was told was that this is combined, for example, in Excel or Tri-State or whoever is providing that electricity, it is kind of all pulled together in one fee. Am I saying that correctly? And that's why they don't see it specifically on other utility providers' bills.
So I'll respond to that. I think, first, let me clarify that anyone who's referring to that type of bill is a bill that's outside of the city of Longmont.
Correct.
Okay, so within the city of Longmont, they're getting their electric from Longmont Electric, LPC. And that electric service is, under the city's tax code, it is taxable. So is the provision of gas from Excel. And so if you look at the Excel bill that you get for when you're a resident of Longmont receiving gas service, you will see that there is broken out a sales tax, city sales tax on that gas provision. Now, this is one of those, you're familiar with the state of Colorado and their sales tax laws, and the bases in different entities are different. The state has its own tax base and its own exemptions and what's taxable or exempted from their code. And then there are cities that the state collects for that typically do follow mostly the state tax base. But most home rule cities like Longmont have their own tax codes, and they may have a difference from the state on what is taxable and what isn't. The state does not tax the provision of electric and gas service. And there's a few cities within this neighboring areas here that also do not tax those. I think it was Frederick and Tacona, the two that I think I identified for you. But every other city that I could identify in this area, up and down the Front Range, from Fort Collins to Loveland to Lyons to Boulder to Louisville to Lafayette to, I think Erie was one or the other, I can't remember what it was, but Firestone is another. They all do tax the provision of electric and gas service, just like Longmont does. Now, outside in an unincorporated area, there is no Weld County sales tax. There's a Boulder County sales tax, but they follow the state tax base. So if they live in unincorporated areas surrounding Longmont, they do not have that tax on the service for their electric or gas, because they're not in an entity that does tax it. So that could be the comparison that you're running into, where an individual is saying, how come this person doesn't have it and I do? So.
Okay. Could you explain for the public the difference between the rate, their electricity rate versus the sales tax?
Well, the sales tax is 3.53%.
But why are we paying two different ones? That's my question. Maybe I'm just not getting the concept. So.
Well, they're paying sales tax rate for the provision of electrical service.
Okay.
And then that's a taxable service under the city's tax code. So then
Okay.
broken out on that tax bill, where we show the electrical service, we are showing that the city sales tax is applied to that electric bill. Does that help?
It does. It does. Yeah. It does. Thank you.
Mayor Peck,
Yes.
I just looked up the customer satisfaction surveys coming on October 18th, so none of those dates I gave you.
So Councillor Martin has a question.
Yes, actually along these lines, the rate on electricity, kilowatt hours, et cetera, obviously goes to fund the distribution, electric distribution enterprise. Where do the sales taxes on those rates go?
So the sales tax is, as I mentioned earlier this evening, it supports operations in 5 different funds of the city. It's a 3.53% overall tax rate. And the first 2% is non-earmarked. And so what the city council does, it directs 85% of that to the general fund. 15% of that goes to the public improvement fund. And then we have a 0.75% street sales tax rate. We have a 0.20% open space rate, and the remaining 0.58 goes towards public safety services. So it does support a variety of services in that budget that we've been discussing.
Mm-hmm. But so the crux of the answer is that they're not paying twice for electricity.
No.
The rate pays for the electricity, the sales tax pays for the same stuff all other sales tax pays for.
That's correct.
And at the risk of creating more confusion, we had the same conversation when we brought Nextlight forward. Nextlight doesn't pay sales tax, but neither does CenturyLink or Comcast, because there's a state provision that they don't pay sales tax on the internet side. So we chose to treat them like we treat the other utilities. Is that correct, Jim?
Yeah, I'm just going to correct you and say that it's not pay anyhow, right? So they're a provider that would be collecting if it was taxable.
Right.
So we're saying they don't collect sales tax.
Correct. They don't collect it.
Because it's not taxable by the city.
Thank you. I know that was confusing for you.
And that's all we had on the budget tonight. I was looking at this to make sure. Okay. Next week, we have about a dozen or more different topics, but I don't think that any of them is going to run too awfully long, so we should be able to get through them okay.
We're really looking forward to it as
Sure.
well. Along with another executive session, so it's going to be another wonderful evening. So we are now at the final call, public invited to be heard. Is there anybody in the public that would like to be heard? I only see one public person, and I don't think she wants to be heard. Okay. No. So we're at city council in comments, mayor and council comments. Seeing none, city manager remarks?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Thank you, city attorney. Thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn? So it's been moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo-Ferring to adjourn. All those in favor, let's vote. Now let's just say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.